Hey guys, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to start the consumables, some items in our inventory that we can actually use and they'll have an effect on something or they'll do something. We're going to set it up in a way so that we can have a wide range of different effects. It just all depends on what you can create. It's not going to be limited to a system necessarily because each item is going to have its own functionality, kind of like we do our weapons. So we can create all kinds of unique weapons. They don't have to do anything similar because they have their own scripts. Each item, each consumable item will be the same way. So we can have one that just heals our player with some health points, or one that does something, it kills all the enemies around you in one little slashy thing. It doesn't really matter. You can do whatever. But before we get to that, what I want to do is... it's been a while, and there's a bunch of stuff to catch up with for that, but not right now. What I'm going to do is go through what has changed since the last episode. Not a lot, just a couple of things that I fixed from the last episode that's not been on video, and then we're going to get into the consumables. So if you're just here for that, you can go ahead and skip ahead a little bit. So what I've done since then is just a couple of really simple things, like I said. First of all, the camera, we'll get into that later on. It's just a simple follow thingy. But if I click on an enemy, I'm going to walk up to the enemy now, right? Before I had to click and get close to the enemy and then bring out my sword and swing. And that sucked. Obviously, that wasn't the ideal way to do it, and that's not how I wanted it to be. So all I did now was I set it up so that if I click on the enemy, I walk up to him, I face him, then I can equip my sword, and I can attack him, right? That's cool. It works the same way as if I walk up to an NPC and have dialogue with him, or walk up to an item. It works the same way, except it's an enemy and I can attack the enemy. The difference is I may want to do something differently with an enemy when I walk up to him, right? So if I walk up to an NPC, I know the action is going to be on the NPC. It's going to be either I have a chat, or I get an item from them, or something like that. Whereas with an enemy, the action's most likely going to be me first doing something, right? Maybe attacking or whatever. So it's going to be a separate thing from the NPC, the item thing. If I click on an item, it's going to add the item to my inventory, all that stuff, blah, blah. And that's fine. So the difference, all I changed, if I go into world interaction, now I have a conditional. This is all rough. I just did this quickly, just to do a couple of things. I just have a conditional checking to see if it's an enemy. If it is, then I'm going to move to the interaction, right? So you notice that these do the exact same thing, and they may be condensed into just one in the future, but for now, they are separated just in case I want to do something differently. And then in Interactable, a few things have changed in here. First of all, since they do the exact same thing, in our world interaction, it does the exact same thing. I cannot tell a difference when I get into here. So for now, I'm just checking to see, hey, is this an enemy? I can know that by checking to see if the tag is enemy. Kind of repeating myself there, but it's fine. I may change it if it bothers me that much. Another thing that I've done is in the update method, where we're checking to see if we are within the stopping distance of the object that we're walking up to. I am saying, hey, if it's an enemy, or if it's not an enemy, I want to interact with it. Therefore, it's an NPC, or an item, or a chest, something like that. Obviously, I want to interact with those things. Whereas an enemy, for now, I don't want to do anything when I walk up to it because the attacking is manual. I tap a button to attack. Again, in the future, I may have an automatic system where it's like an auto attack. Something like RuneScape, the auto attack in games like that. But for now, you know what we have. So I'm doing, I'm not interacting, but what I am doing for both things, whether it's an enemy or not, is I'm doing something that I called ensure look direction. It's a stupid name for the method, but it's fine for now. And all that does is, first of all, I disable the automatic rotation updating, which means that for now, when it's false, the nav agent does not control the rotation of my object. So that means I can do that. And it won't affect the navigation because I'm turning it off and then turning it back on. So in between, I am getting a vector that's just very simple. That is the vector between the interactable, in this case the enemy, most likely, and my player. So it's just going to pretty much just draw a vector between those 2 points. And I'm going to take that vector and pass it to my player agent, go through transform, and use the look at method, which rotates my object, in this case the player, in the direction of that vector. So the vector is just taking, it's not drawing, it's hard to explain. It's not taking any other information other than the Y from my enemy and the Y from my player. X is just going right back to itself. It's the X of the transform, which means that since I'm getting the look direction from the interactable, it's just going to be nothing. And same for the Z, because those aren't changing. I'm just rotating on the Y, so I don't care about either of those things. And then passing it into my look at, and then turning that back on. Very important, you turn it back on so it can be controlled and updated by the nav mesh agent. And I think that's all that's changed in there. That's all that's changed for that. What we're going to do now is get started on the consumables, which means we're going to work on some item stuff. We're going to write a couple of things in there, work in the inventory controller that we created. This is going to be another placeholder thing until we get like a real inventory in place. But I just want to make sure that the items and everything can work, and then I'll design the inventory around that. And then we're going to just get into that and make it where that we can actually use an item. That's the goal. So let's get started with that. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my item. I'm going to open that up in Visual Studio, and I'm going to add a couple of things to this. I'm going to keep this constructor, but I also want to add another constructor here. And it's going to have a couple of different properties. It's going to be, let's see, we're going to add a, say a description. And then I want to add action name. Now, action name is going to be something, say my inventory system is going to be a list of items. And then I can select a list of items, and then it's going to pop up in the panel information about that item. It's going to have the title and the description, maybe an icon or something. And then it'll also have like a button, and it'll say drink or use or drop or trash or something like that. It'll have a button that has the action name in it. It might have multiple actions, but for now we'll have just the one. And so this one, say we'll make a potion, it'll be drink. And then I want to have, I don't even have a name yet. So let's do public string. I'll make a, has to be, let's do item name. And then I want a bool to see if, I want a boolean to see if this item is a modifier item. If it's something that modifies the stats of my player, of my character. Because if it is, I need to treat it a little bit differently. I need to know that ahead of time, so I know if I need to grab the character stats and then do something with them, right? And I feel like I need to know that ahead of time. Maybe I don't, but for now we'll say I do. And I'm going to say item modifier. Just a simple true or false. Is it or is it not? And this is showing an error because it's an exact duplicate of this one, right? It's the exact same thing. Can't have that. So I'm going to add these in here in the same pattern that we're using. It's not necessarily the best pattern, but we're going to keep going with it. And it's going to be a string of description. Then a string of action name. And this may be something that we create an enum for in the future. And then maybe even like a stats enum for other items. But for now, string's fine. And then a string for item name. And then a bool for item modifier. And I'm going to fill it all in as we did before. Skipping most of this, I'm sure. Dot description is equal to description. And then so that's great. Now what I can do is I can actually create an item, at least the shell of an item for whatever we're making. The consumable I'm going to make is going to be a potion that when I consume it or when I drink it, it's going to log something to the console. That's crazy, isn't it? Going to log something to the console. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create it the same way I've created the sword. Again, not how we're going to do it in the end, but I'm just making stuff to play around with for now. And then we'll add a system for creating items and stuff like that. So first of all, I'm looking at this, and what I realize that I'm going to need is for this potion, it's going to require stats. Is that right? It's going to require stats. Is that something that I should be okay with? That the potion requires stats? Maybe the potion requires stats that are used in the bonuses? That's a lot of work. Maybe I just get rid of that from this constructor and keep everything else. For now, we don't, but you may do whatever you would like. Because my potions aren't going to have a use for stats, at least right now that I can think of. Because each effect is going to be coded into the item. So I'm not really sure about what we're going to do with that. That's fine, though. So I'm going to do a public item. I don't know why it's public, but the sword is, so I'm going to go with that too. And it's going to be called potion log. And then I'm going to say potion log is equal to new item, as I do with the sword. And I'm just going to pass it sword stats as well, so I don't have to make a new list for that. Or I could even just pass it new list base stat. And then it needs an object slug. In this case, it's going to be called potion underscore log. I'm starting with potion so I can have all my potions alphabetically near each other. And then it's just whatever follows that is the type of potion. Again, do it however you want. Those kinds of things, up to your design choices. So potion log, it needs a description. Drink this to log something cool. And then an action name. I'm going to call it drink. We're not using that just yet, but it's there just in case. And then it's going to be called log potion. Notice it's backwards, but it's fine. It's how it's supposed to be. And then item modifier. This is not an item modifier. So I got potion log. It's created. It exists kind of now. So for testing purposes, what I want to do is I want to throw it in here where I will use it whenever I equip my sword, just for testing, right? Just so I can see if it works. But how am I going to consume something? And that's what we have to figure out now. How am I going to consume something? So the item itself, if I create a physical representation of that item, it'll have a consume method on it. And then I will call that method, and then whatever effects need to take place will take place because I called that method. The same way that our weapons have attack methods. So we have to figure out how to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another script file. I want to call it iConsumable. It's going to be an interface for consumables. Consumable interface. Reload all for now. Okay. So we know how this works. It's not any of this we need. We don't need this. And it is an interface. Right? And what are my consumables going to need? I know for a fact they're going to need a consume method. Fair enough. What else will they need though? We can not get it all right now and that'll be fine. What I'll do is I'll just say void consume. And then if I have a consumable that affects my character stats, the consumable will need a reference to the character's stats. Or the handler that handles consuming everything, I want to pass an item to a controller of some sort, it will need a reference to the character stats. But if it has it, how will it work? These are things that we have to figure out. So what I want to do is I want to take, for now, I'm going to say, yeah, my consumables will probably have a reference to the character's stats. And it will probably be passed from my consumable controller or handler, whatever it's going to be called. And that may work. So what we'll do is I'll have another method. This might make sense later on. Maybe it won't ever make sense. I don't know. Character stats, stats. So that'll be our character stats, or player stats in that case. And for now, that's what we've got. Back into Unity, I'm going to create a new C# script again. And I want to call this one... See, I could create a base class. Oh, there's a pop again. I'm sorry. I could create a base class for consumables. I could create a potion class. I could create like a food class. And then like a quest item class, something that you use that causes something to happen in the world. Or I could not. I can't think of something of a function that is universal enough currently to justify creating all those base classes, just to make me feel better in the end. I cannot justify it as it is. So what I'm going to do is not worry about it. I'm going to create, it's going to be called potion log. Notice it is the name of our item, and we would have this organized in another folder, and we'll do that in a little bit, but for now, we'll keep it as it is. So potion log it is. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to be a mono behavior, but it's going to inherit or implement interface I consumable, and it's going to give an error and say, hey, please do something with this. And I'm going to say, okay, I would like to implement it, please. And it implements it for me. So now what I want to do is I want consume to do something. That means whenever consume is called, it's going to do something, right? That's the whole point of a consumable item. What this potion does is it logs something to the console, and that was the whole idea. So I'm going to say, you drank a swig of the potion. Cool. And then we'll say the same thing right here, but this will say something different so we know it's different. Rad. All right. So now that I have that set up, I want to attach it to a physical object, something in the game world. So I'm going to create a 3D object. I'm going to create a capsule. Because what's going to happen when I consume something? What's the process? What's going to happen is it's going to, from the inventory, it's going to find the item. It's going to spawn it in the world. And my idea is I would like to do a cool little animation. Like make it pop up above the player's head. Make it show above the player's head. Maybe do like a little fade animation or something, showing that you use the item in the real world and then it was consumed. So to do that, what I'm doing is from the inventory, I'm spawning the physical object, and then I'm calling a component on that object that has, say, potion log, which contains consume, and it's going to use it, and then it's going to destroy itself. So there's nothing happening that's like magical here. I'm actually creating an object in the world and then using that object and then just destroying it. And that's fine. And we'll handle that the same way in the inventory. When I use the object, it's going to know the object slug, same way the weapons work. It's going to spawn that item. And then when it spawns that item, it's going to delete it from the inventory. No longer exists in the inventory. It exists in the real world until it is consumed. For now, that'll all be instantaneous. Won't even notice it happening. But later on, we can add a cool little animation, like it bouncing up and down above the player's head or something. So I'll call this potion log. And I'm going to attach potion log script file to that. And there it is. Cool. So I'm going to make this, make it a resource. So I'm going to add a folder, Consumables. Within Consumables, you know what, I'm not going to go into all that because we're not going to make that many things in the tutorial, but for you, you could have like potions and food and components, quest items, all that kind of stuff. But for me, don't care. So there, that is great. So potion log, and that is it's going to be the object slug that we use to spawn the item. So that's cool. So what I have to do now is that's attached to that, the object's created. I have to create a controller to handle all this. So whenever I'm an inventory controller, And I want to go through, say, how we do player weapon controller. It's the one thing that handles all of the weapons stuff. We're going to have the one thing that handles all of the consumable stuff. And it's going to be pretty simple, but pretty cool. Like most things we do, right? So I'm going to go create C# script. I'm going to call it, just to keep with my controller theme, I'm going to call it consumable controller. I'm going to open that up. And now this is going to be simple. It only has to do one thing, really, right? Get rid of update, don't need that. Doesn't have to do anything, but this may need a reference to the character stats. It's going to do that right there. If it is something that updates stats, it'll need that. And this way we can have just one object in the world, probably on the player itself, that has a reference to the stats for the consumables. Instead of having each item that we spawn have its own reference, we're going to have this one thing that can pass it to the items if it needs it. And we'll go ahead and set that up. We'll say stats is equal to get component. It's going to be on the player object, which we don't really have a player script or a player component, but we do have a player object that consists of a bunch of different components that help make everything work. And that's kind of the whole idea. We have a bunch of components that make up basic systems. What am I doing? Get component, what's it called? Character stats. There we go. And now, a method I'll have in here will be a public method. It's going to be a void. And it's going to be called consume item. Fair enough. Now, this item is going to be of item type. And it's going to be an item. It creates it, makes it very simple for us to be able to pass it an actual item. You notice that that's what this is right here. This is an item. So I can just create items and pass it to this consumable thing, and it will handle everything else. And that's cool, as I was saying. But what we'll do is, how did I get in here? I don't know what I just did. Where did my thing go? Consume item. Then what it's going to do, it's going to take that item, grab the object slug, and try to spawn it. Hopefully. So I'm going to say game object item to spawn. The same way we handle spawning the weapon. Item to spawn is equal to instantiate. Let's see, how am I going to do this? Instantiate, go through resources, dot load. I'm going to load an object of type game object, and then the path to the actual object in the resources folder is going to be through consumables. So everything that gets passed to this controller is going to be a consumable, therefore it should be in the consumable folder. And then I'm going to look for something by the name of item.object_slug. And if we wire everything up correctly, that should find the thing that we're looking for. Up to us, though. And I'm going to check to see if this has an item modifier. Because if it does, I'm going to use a different consume method on that item. So, for instance, if item dot, what I call an item modifier, if that is true, then I want to go through item to consume or item to spawn. I should call that consume. That makes more sense. Item to spawn dot get component. And now again, the same way we did with the weapon. All of our consumable items are going to have this interface, so we can grab the component of the item, so in this case potion log, because it shares an interface. The same way that all of our weapons share an interface in a sense, right? So we have consumable. All of our things that can be consumed will be of that, so we know we can find it by using get component and then looking for that component that shares that interface. And then I will consume. Now remember, our item has two consume methods on it, one with stats, one without. So this one, being a modifier item, has stats. So all I'm going to do is pass it stats. That way, consumable controller has a stats reference, and now potion log assuming it was a modifier, has a reference as well because it needs it. In this case, it doesn't, but that's just the idea, right? So, just to keep this nice and rough as we've been going, nothing's too pretty here. I wanted to do get components, consumable, consume, just like that without that. So I'm saying if that is that, I'll do that. If not, I'm doing this. So I'm not doing an if not though, or not doing an else. Should I do an else here, or should I just break out of that? Should I do an else or just break? I'll just do an else for now. And I may just, again, another thing I may end up changing. I don't know. I feel like it's not loading it properly. That's fine though. I'm sure we'll be fine. So now what I can do is my inventory controller will need a reference to my consumable controller. Consumable controller. It's not a word I type very often. It's not as easy as it seems. Consumable controller. I'm going to go in here. And again, I decided I'm going to test it by using the same key. Consume item. Pass it my potion log. And now, if everything works out, I should be able to go to my game and consume a potion. I'm probably missing something. The item's actually in the world still. Don't need that. So now when I hit V, let's get this up and Jesus. Go and hit V. Nothing happened. Oh, I don't have a reference. I just have it typed in here. What I can do is it's going to be on the player. I didn't even attach this to the player. It's going to be consumable controller is equal to get component. Consumable controller. And now what I have to do is attach consumable controller to my player. Because it handles all this stuff for us. It's nice in that way. Gotta start over. Now play. Now I'm going to equip my sword. Boom. You drank? You drank a swig of the potion. Cool. So that's a good start for consumables, right? So I can equip it and it will do that. Now that is an error with having a sword equipped and then trying to re-equip that sword. It does something with the stat bonuses not working. We'll fix that in something else when it's more relevant to what we're actually working on. So what we've got now is that's a good start for the functionality of the inventory because we have a way to equip weapons. We have a way to consume items. And those are the key elements to the inventory is having those things be functional. So what I want to do next is, if I can get away with it and not have to fix other things, is I would like to work on actually setting up the inventory to be the inventory. Right now it's a mess in here because it's just a bunch of testing happening, right? So I would actually like to create a list of items and then be able to add items to the player inventory, have like an actual inventory list. Maybe not, with an interface and everything just yet, but something that represents the inventory, and then have a way to go through and activate those items so I can equip a sword and drink a potion from the list and not do it all manually this way. And that's going to be something we start on in the next video. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. My name is Austin, and I will see you next time.